What a hoot, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Hunter. My pronouns are he, they. And we have an amazing speaker today who is so fun and has some very exciting uh, tricks, tips, techniques to show us today. Can't wait to jump in. So you are at the Power to Fly Chat and Learn. We're advocating for career advancement with AI. This is a real exciting one. So hold on to your seats, buckle up, get yourself nice and cozy. We're going to have a good time here. So first off, just a little bit of code of conduct. Be sure that you are using inviting language. You can write in the chat at any time. We encourage you to ask your questions. So please be sure we're on topic and we're respectful of everyone in the space today so we can all have a great time. And please, 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 please feel free to participate. You can turn your cameras on. This is a casual affair here. Sit back, relax. Don't need to be Instagram ready or perfect. We're all imperfect human beings, and we're just going to learn some great stuff. You can ask questions in the chat, so feel free to write your questions in the chat, and I will ask them on your behalf. You can also DM me if you would like to ask them anonymously. That's totally welcome here. Okay, so we have our friend from Zapier today, which is a very amazing automation tool platform. There's a whole ecosystem. It keeps growing and evolving with more things you can do. They are hiring. Check out the jobs available over at the Power to Fly website and click on the jobs tab, and you can learn more about the opportunities there. I am a big Zapier fan and user myself, so I'm very excited to jump in and talk to Emily Mabie. She is the learning designer, manager enablement. So Emily Mabie is the learning designer at Zapier, specializing in manager enablement. With over a decade of experience in education, edtech, and e-learning, she is dedicated to creating impactful learning experiences and leveraging cutting-edge tech to enable efficient and impactful work. Emily is passionate about equity-driven design and leverages her strengths to enhance the user experience for people managers. Please give a digital round of applause to Emily Mabie. Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Hunter. I'm so excited to get to share some space with everybody today. And I know we're going to kick off by watching a quick demo, but I am most excited for the Q&A that's going to come afterwards.
Yes, totally. Me too. So Emily gets a gold star because she made a demo video just for us in advance to walk you through some really awesome tips and techniques to use Zapier and to set you up for success of creating resumes in a way that I don't know that I had ever seen before. This is brilliant. So for looking to enhance your resume experience and other techniques you'll learn in this video. So sit back and relax. Feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is blowing my mind. How do you do that? What if I do this? Fire it up in the chat so that after the video, which is about 10 minutes or so, then we will jump into Q&A. And so if you're asking your questions in the chat, we can start with those as well. Okay, my friends, so let's jump in and take a look. Emily, will you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear it okay once I hit play?
I think an important part of career development is being prepared to develop outside of your current role or company. So, part of what I'm going to demonstrate here is how to be ready for opportunities that are not at your current workplace. If you're like me, every week you're expected to report on the progress that you've made on projects, goals, or non goal related work. And I want to take this work I'm already doing to summarize my impact at the company and translate it into resume ready snippets so that at a moment's notice, I can tailor a resume based on everything I've done at work. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a few AI tools. In this case, I've set up a table. I'm using Zapier tables. And this table contains a list of resume formatted accomplishments from my past job, my current job. If I click into one of these, you can see they're phrased with action verbs, and some of them have metrics attached. So super ready to go into a resume. And I have this assistant here. It's called Central. This is another Zapier product. It has access to that table, and it also has access to adding to that table, creating records, and most importantly, I've given it this behavior here. Let me click into it and show you. It says that whenever I react in Slack with the reaction career growth, that emoji, what's going to happen is that Slack message will be translated into a list of resume formatted accomplishments. And I gave an example about something that I posted in Slack that I had accomplished, and then told this assistant, here's how I would ask you to reformat that accomplishment into a resume format phrase. And then once the assistant is done, it's going to add it into this work accomplishments table. Now, it's already been working on this, as you can see, but I'll show you one live. So let's go ahead and navigate to Slack. And here we've got a list of accomplishments I posted on a Friday to share with my team about what I had worked on in the week. And I'm going to go ahead and react with career growth as my reaction. And I'll show you what this assistant is able to do for me. And it has gone ahead and started parsing out that Slack content into these resume formatted phrases that I can pull at a moment's notice. It's continuing to make progress on that. While it does, I want to show you the other superpower that this AI assistant has, which is because it has access to this data source and it's also updating it, I get this wraparound power up where AI is helping me keep track of my work accomplishments, build a resume whenever I need one, but it's also able to converse with that database. And so what I might want to do is something like, please look at learning designer roles that have been posted to job boards in the last 7 days. What roles look like a good fit for my skills based on the work accomplishments data source? All right, so it has returned for me specific roles that it's sharing relate to the skills that I have in my work accomplishments table. It's giving me the link. If I click here, it'll open it in a new tab. And the benefit here is if I choose one of these, so for instance, let's use this one here at ZipRecruiter. I'd like to put together a resume for the role at ZipRecruiter. Can you please put a resume together for me using the accomplishments from my work accomplishment data source? And the biggest benefit here is that we're not giving AI the opportunity to make things up about us. We want to be super, super honest when we are using AI to help us advance our career. So it's going to look through actual accomplishments I've had that are recorded in my table, and it's going to compile the ones that are a best fit for this role. And as you can see, it has constructed a resume using the information from my work accomplishments table. It's done its best to pull out information from this database of work accomplishments that match the job description of the listing that I asked it to help me apply for. And I can then take this, customize it, give it a little bit of more information about me, and then apply to that role, confident that it hasn't made anything up, it's using my actual work accomplishments. And one more possibly unsung hero of using AI in this way is that it's really easy to succumb to recency bias when you're applying for jobs and only think of work you've done very recently. This table has accomplishments that I've tracked for over 2 years. And they're things that I might not think offhandedly that I am capable of doing. But here I see all all of those details pulled to the forefront and matched to the role that's listed online. So this is just one way that AI can empower me to develop my career if I'm looking externally for that career development. I also want to share one way to up-level your career advocacy in your current role. And this one is going to be very simple. I have, as I showed you in the last demo, a Zap or an automation setup where I can react to something in Slack and it will show up somewhere else, like in a table. Whenever I get feedback at work that highlights my skills, I react to that feedback with a little emoji that looks like a smiling file, and it goes into a smile file, a table full of feedback that I can use to advocate for myself in my career. And I've made a demo here to show you. It just collects a few pieces of information: the name of the person who gave me the feedback, what their feedback was, and you can see some of these are pasted from Slack, and then the date at which I received it. Now, the way that we can use AI to help us advocate is by adding, in this case in a Zapier table, an AI field, and I'm going to call this competency analysis. Many of us work in work environments where we have competencies that guide how we're assessed for performance, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here. I'm going to go ahead and set up my OpenAI authentication, and then I'm going to create a prompt for this field in the table. All I'm going to do is paste in the competencies that are used in my workplace for my job level and for one job level higher than mine, so that this AI assistant will help me justify whether I'm doing work at my level or a level above mine. And then I need to add a few fields from the table itself. So first I'm going to grab the field, the name of the person who's giving us the feedback, and it says that person has shared this feedback with me, Emily Mabie. Here's the feedback itself. We'll go ahead and add that field from the table. And then I'm asking it to please qualify this feedback against the competencies that are used at my job level. Use just a few bullet points, something I could share with my manager in a performance review, and be really specific about the feedback. But I also want it to take a look at whether I'm meeting the next level of competency. So it's going to take a look through both sets of competencies, and I've given it some example outputs to guide it because AI works really well with examples. And when I click done and create this field, watch what happens. This bot has read the feedback from the feedback column, and it has given an analysis of how I am demonstrating my company's competencies at level, but also in this case, noting when in some cases I might be demonstrating the next level competency behaviors. And for some of these, it will show my ability to stretch into new levels. And in some of them, it's just being honest with me that I'm meeting my current competency level right where I'm at. This is a way to advocate for yourself using AI, and I find it particularly empowering if you're someone who has suffered a lot from imposter syndrome, because you have sort of this like objective third party looking at feedback you're getting and sharing with you where you belong within the scope of your company. So this is just another tool to consider when you're thinking about internal career advocacy.
I love that. That is so wild what we can do now with a little bit of power, a little bit of knowledge and tools. Thank you so much for making that demo, Emily. I'd love to hear about, there's so much in there that I love. Working our way from the end backwards, I love that this is not just a practical use, but also an empowering use for folks that maybe struggle with imposter syndrome. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see as well that we kind of touch on that in our Q&A too, about the idea of AI as a tool for validation of your expertise, which often is like the underpinning for imposter syndrome, is we don't feel valid as an expert. I want to highlight the fact that the research around imposter syndrome really bears out that there are a few like weapons that we can use to defeat it. One of those weapons is self-compassion, which another way to think of that is like telling positive stories about yourself. And another one that I think AI is really helpful for leveraging is that we should not be comparing our performance or ourselves against other people in our field. And the AI tooling that I demonstrate there really allows us to, instead of comparing ourselves against other people at our level or in our field, we're comparing ourselves against our past self. It's always ourselves against ourselves. We're competing against yesterday's version of you. And when we only compare ourselves against the benchmark of us, we have this ability to highlight our growth and see how we're progressing towards personal goals.
Mm.
And the other piece there is that idea of compassionate stories and telling ourselves positive stories about ourselves. AI can really help us to be compassionate by leaning into the strengths in what we've done. And, when you engineer a prompt, like I did in that demonstration, I'm specifically asking it to highlight opportunities where I've leaned into competencies. I absolutely could ask it to do the same thing for growth areas, but I use that space, that sort of neutral third party robot setting to really cultivate like a positive self-image. And it's just like a third add-in with the
Mhm.
internal voices about my own performance and all the external voices that I'm hearing that are always analyzing my expertise.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Over the years here at Power to Fly, I've heard a lot of folks talk about different ways of making sure to catalog those wins, right? Because it's easy as a human to have a negativity bias and just remember all the things that I didn't do right, as opposed to all the things I did do right, which are probably dozens every single day. But then I'll remember that one thing that I goofed, and then I'll fixate on that. So to have this place for that, like you said, that neutral robot friend to be like, actually, you did this, and this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so easy for those little stumbling moments to take up a disproportionate amount of space in our narrative. So it's helpful to have a place to go when that happens.
100%. I've had folks say, like, take a screenshot of things or like do a spreadsheet. And if you're a spreadsheet person now it's real good because AI loves a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yeah. I also love in there that you had those benchmarks of making call outs to when you were achieving above your um requirements. I don't know. Can you talk about that a little bit too, of like looking ahead and how you like figure like what is within my zone, what's above my zone that I'm now tapping into? How did you figure that out?
That's a great question. So I know that what's true for a lot of us isn't true for all of us. And for a lot of us, we work in environments where there are very defined job levels. So for instance, if I'm at a job level 3 learning designer, I might have a clear idea of what that looks like because of a competency framework. And I might also be able to see what a job level 4 learning designer is intended to do and what their performance looks like. I leveraged that privilege, the fact that I have that available when I made my prompts, but I think it's worth stating that is only as valuable as it being what you actually want to act on, right? I'm a firm believer in the idea that we should only be gathering data we mean to act on, otherwise it's just noise. Uh,
Mm.
and I mean to act on working towards the next job level, working towards promotion. There are also hundreds of other ways to grow and to advocate for growth in your career. So if you are someone who, instead of caring about reaching for that next job level, let's say what you really care about is becoming someone who's perceived as a more articulate and confident public speaker, you could adjust your prompt to look specifically for feedback that serves that purpose. And then your smile file could be all about recognizing times when people felt like you really leaned in that direction, and you could track over time how often you get that positive feedback. So I also just want to say, like, it's totally valid if your version of career growth or development isn't a promotion. There are so many ways to grow and develop.
I love smile file.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, smile file, brag bag. I love it.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so good. So, so good. So I'd love to hear about perhaps, there's a lot of, so we were focusing here on a Zapier automation. Also you mentioned OpenAI in there when you were tapping into some credentials you mentioned. We had a question in advance. Someone asked, are there any free or low cost AI tools that you would recommend for career advancement?
Yes. Ah, and I was so excited to see this question. Of course, when I built my demo, I demonstrated Zapier's tools because I work there and I use them all the time. But a large part of that is that they're really cost effective for me. And if I were a solo job seeker and I were looking for other tools that might be more cost effective for you, a few
Mm.
tools that I would note. Number one, the base version of ChatGPT is free to use. So if it's something you have access to, you could follow all the steps that I demonstrated in my demo earlier and just manualize it. So Zapier, right, we're all about automation, but you could construct a prompt in ChatGPT and analyze feedback in that way, or analyze your accomplishments and build a resume right in ChatGPT. So base version, free to use. That's as cost effective as it gets. Another free or low cost, depending on if you want to choose to use their paid features, option that I'm sure many of you have heard of is Teal, Teal. It's a resume customization tool and a job hunt tracker. And when I was making my last career move, I leaned heavily on Teal's tooling. It's so polished and easy to use.
Mm.
You don't have to build it yourself. But I will say, if you're someone who feels comfortable tinkering, a tool like Zapier or using a spreadsheet with ChatGPT lets you customize what you want and really build it for your own like working norms, your own competencies or career goals in a way that for me was really motivating. So those are just a few to mention.
I love that. So would you say, because you brought up teal, and I did dabble in that. I actually, thanks for calling that one out. I hadn't thought about that. And maybe since I found it like 8 months ago or something, I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad that thing exists. Would you say that if you make the automation yourself with Zapier, like teal is giving you sort of like an out of the box, like more limited version of what you showed us, or a less customizable version?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And what Teal does, they do super well. It's just that like their boundaries are the job hunt. And with
Mhm.
Zapier, like the job hunt is one of the things I can do with Zapier. But once I get that job, I can then track my work accomplishments, track my professional goals in Zapier and keep customizing it. Whereas like that isn't the true point and purpose of Teal. Its job is done once you secured your role.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because then if you do set up your first automation over in Zapier, then you know how to do that, and then you can make another one that does a different thing, and then you got your training wheels off, and then you get that off to the races.
Absolutely. And then go figure, it can go on your resume that you can automate.
Oh, look at that! Look at that! That's very, very true. Well, speaking of resumes, so we saw how we can take, if you have this automation in the demo where you have your knowledge base, your database of all your things you've done. I want to call out that you mentioned the recently bias. How did you phrase it? I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, recency bias, only like
Recency
focusing
bias.
on the things that happened in the nearest proximity to today.
Yes, yes, yes. It's so good because I can be like a goldfish and I'll just remember what happened this week if I'm lucky. But thanks to AI, it can pull back way, way back to so many past experiences, wins, job moments, all of that good, rich stuff. So we have that, and we can put that into the resume. But how would you, so like you said in the demo, it's a great place to start, right? So it puts it in there. How would you suggest making it more compelling? Or if we want to write a cover letter that is still unique to us and doesn't sound like AI, but we're still leveraging these tools that help us get us off the ground.
Oh, I was so excited to see this question come into the Q&A. And if you were here for the demo, you're going to notice that I'm kind of hammering on something, which is that I am a firm believer in the idea of using AI to align, not to create. So that concept of harnessing the power of AI to align your existing skills and accomplishments to a job description, not creating skills and accomplishments.
Mm.
AI is so great at so many things, but unfortunately, one of those is hallucinating, which is making up answers.
Which is
AI,
called making things up.
yeah, exactly. AI is really great at making up things that sound good sometimes. But in order to answer the question of like how to make it compelling,
Mm.
always, always take a second and read through what's been written for you by AI and make sure that it makes enough sense that you could confidently explain it to whoever you're talking to. Because as we all know, the resume is the foot in the door, and then the interview is sometimes a conversation about that resume. So once you've got AI helping you construct and align existing credentials that are true about you to a job description, read through it. Does it sound like you? Does it sound like something that you could really talk about at length? And then my little hint about the cover letter, and I've actually gotten to do this several times, is most of us write our cover letters in like Google Docs or Word, and we might have from a given time of application, let's say like 20 cover letters because we applied to 20 jobs. I'll actually take all 20 of those and give them all to ChatGPT, just paste them right into the text box, and I'll say, hey, here's the job I'm applying for right now. I want you to replicate my language and delivery as closely as possible based on these 20 samples of completely different unrelated jobs, and then take your best shot. And usually, what it will come up with is I tend to have a standard intro. I tend to kind of talk the same way when I'm introducing myself. It sounds a lot like me. Now, all I have to do is adjust the details. Who am I addressing? What do I really want to highlight about my skills? And you can give it your resume too in the same beat to take a little bit of extra edit time out of it. But that is how I have used the power of AI to make my resume, my cover letter just a little bit more compelling.
I love that. And I love your phrase about AI's power is to align and not create.
Yeah.
It's that distillation I hadn't heard before, and it's chef's kiss because because we need that like outside source, right? To like help us align with all of these different parameters. Like you said, maybe you applied to 20 jobs and it can get a little, you're like, what am I going to talk about in this one? You know? And that alignment is great because you can also drop in the job description. You can say, in my skills,
Yeah.
what are in here? My pro tip would be like, don't just repeat the job description in my cover letter because AI loves to do that. I've noticed too, where it'll just be like, it's like, this is good, but that's just someone else's, that's just what the job recruiters want to hear potentially, as opposed to how do I align it with what I already have. Like you said, bringing, you want to be able to speak to that it's actually in your zone of genius, not making up stuff that you would never want to feel uncomfortable in a job interview, like you're lying or exaggerating. How can you align it to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. So I love we're getting some good comments in the chat right now. People are starting to get fired up. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We also have this Q&A feature in Zoom that you're welcome to use, and I can see it there. If you're a little more cozy with the chat, totally fine. Both works. I can see it all. So we had some comments. Same way that AI will not steal your job, a colleague who can use AI better than you would might take your job, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the end of that sentence. Yeah, totally. And someone else said, totally can relate. Organizing each application and aligning your skill sets can ease anxiety, stress pre-interview.
Yes.
So important, right? Going back to that well-being for ourselves, right? I love because you said, Emily, that you're an advocate for people to be in their best self in that way. Are there other ways that AI has helped you like align and ground and help you show up the best way at work? Because you have a very demanding job. You have a lot to do.
I um I use AI so frequently that it's hard to think of an example I couldn't center
Mm-hmm.
on. I think that one that I really want to touch on, and I think it relates more to, I've kind of made this artificial division between like internal career advocacy and external career advocacy. But I want to focus for a second on relating what I'm hearing in the chat to this idea of like using AI to identify and capitalize on career advocacy that's taking us outside of our current role.
Mm.
And I, for the record, I mean, I'm on camera right now. I do not make a secret of the fact that I interview regularly and I love my job. I think it's really crucial to
Hmm.
stay on top of what the current job market looks like, keep current on the landscape of skills, role expectations, etc. So every 6 months, I accept one of the invitations I get in LinkedIn to interview for a role. And something that I make a habit of doing is I make sure that before I go into an interview, I choose work that I've done that I want to make sure to highlight. So sometimes when you're reading a job description, you might think to yourself, like, oh my gosh, when I worked on project Y, I crushed exactly what they're looking for. I really hope I get an opportunity to talk about that in the interview. So, what I'll do is I'll choose what I think is essential to highlight. And I will think through, like, okay, what accomplishment frames a really key skill that only I possess that's going to make me stand out? And then
Mm.
I'll open ChatGPT, I'll describe that accomplishment, that skill, and I'll say, hey, I want to be able to tell this story in a job interview. So please give me 20 of the most common instructional design interview questions and format that story I want to tell as a star formatted response. STAR is like the way you're supposed to answer interview questions to highlight what you accomplished. And if I really want to make sure to work a story into an interview, I will make sure that I have captured 20 different ways that I could lean into that story and still answer the question that an interviewer is going to ask, but make sure that I don't miss the opportunity to highlight something that I think is really important for them to walk away with. So that's just sort of one thing I want to make sure to share with folks. There's lots of ways to internally advocate for your career, but when you're thinking about looking outside of your current role, that's one way that you can leverage AI to help you.
I love that. And if you're hearing for the first time, friends, STAR method, it's great. Situation, task, action, results. So it's a way to shape how you're thinking about a story. It's a great way to remove rambling or tangents. It's a great structure to keep us on message for, as Emily was saying, the story I want to tell,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's so important now. People want to hear your story. How do you comfortably tell your story, not repeat your resume to a person, right? Because I read your resume. Oh, thank you, Riaz, dropping it in the chat, the STAR method there. That's awesome. I've read your resume. I want to know who you are. And like what Emily, you just said, is what makes it unique to me that only I possess is
Yeah.
so crucial. And I need to call out and ask some questions that you regularly interview and are open about this is so cool. So talk to me about this relationship to your like leadership, your team, This is not a normal thing you're talking about, and I love this.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to get to be so open about that.
Yeah.
That that has absolutely not been true in other jobs that I've had. I have often worked in environments where if someone found out you interviewed, it's like a mortal sin against the company, your
Yeah.
manager, your team. And I am like completely open with my current team, my current manager. We have regular conversations about exactly why I'm staying in my current role because I think it's
Mm,
easy to ask, like, why are you looking to leave? But if you know someone's interviewing and they still work where they work, it's really valuable to learn what is making them want to stay. Um, I'm super open about like my bare minimum qualifications for looking anywhere else. Uh,
mm,
and I am open about that both with recruiters who reach out to me on LinkedIn and my current team and my manager. My manager and I both have similar goals for ourselves and for each other. We want to be like the best versions of ourselves to show up at work. And knowing about the landscape of tech and especially like manager enablement, learning design in tech is a part of that. So it feels natural to stay on the cusp of like what I would need to know to be in an interview. And interviewing is an important part of staying current. So yeah, I love being able to interview regularly and stay current on what not only I would need to bring to the table, but also like what current roles look like and what they're offering. And I'm really, really glad that I don't have to do that in secrecy because the truth is I would do it either way. And it's nice to be able to have a transparent relationship with my workplace about it.
how did you first broach that? How did that become clear to you that that would be safe, that you had that psychological safety at work to say, hey, I'm doing this? Because you already had the cues to bring it up. So, what were those cues?
Yeah, another wonderful question. So there are a few. The first one is our talent acquisition team at Zapier, so the team of recruiters. I had heard them being transparent about it, and I thought these are the
Mm.
people who hired me, and they're comfortable talking about like knowing about other roles and talking to other recruiters about roles outside of Zapier. That made me feel really secure. And the fact that again, they're talking about it and they still work here. Like they
Mhm.
could leave, I guess, but they don't want to. And that was first. Second, and this is I'm in manager enablement, so I'm going to talk about managers and what I think they should do. My manager does an amazing job, and my past manager did too, of proactively starting conversations about my career goals and being open to anything that looks like. So if you ask that question, but the only right answer is staying at your current job and in your current role, it's an artificial conversation and everybody's just saying what they think will please the other person. My
Mm.
manager was really great about saying like, what does growth look like to you? Is it here? Is it somewhere else? And how can I support whatever it looks like? And after growing a relationship with my manager and seeing that, like, that's not just lip service. When my manager asks me questions, they genuinely want to know the answers, even if they're hard. I learned that, like, I can be honest about that and be really open about
Mm.
the fact that, like, as long as all of my needs are met at Zapier, that's where I'd like to be. The last thing I'll say is if you're a fan of strengths assessments at all, at Zapier, we use the Berkman report. And I know there are other assessments out there, but one of the things that the Berkman sort of forces us to talk about is what kind of incentives we need. And long story short, money. I need to get and I need to get paid like what I think I'm worth.
Yeah.
And the Berkman assessment is something that we use at Zapier to facilitate like conversations as a team with our managers and even just reflecting on ourselves. And so very early, I got to talk about how like, yeah, I'm motivated by praise, who isn't, but I need to get paid. And so getting to be so transparent about the actual incentives that I work for
Yeah.
also opened up very real conversations about what it would take to leave and what that would look like.
Yeah. And as you said, if you're for your leadership, for your managers, or if you're a manager and you have this transparency with your team and they're choosing to stay, that's huge because then you understand that, oh, they're in this, they're committed, they're invested, they clearly are enjoying what they're doing to the extent that they are choosing to stay. That's enormous. I wish more places had this fluidity in conversation, because we only got one life to live, right? Like, might as well be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. I love it. So I love that we're talking about goals and how to keep track of them and how AI can help us. So I in your demo, we saw that you had a big stockpile of achievements and then you were able to implement those. But if we were to take a step back, how can AI help in setting and achieving actionable career goals?
I just got through doing a coaching session with someone on this, which is another facet of my job. So this was really top of mind for me going into this conversation. It can be so hard to go from idea to action. And I feel like it's even harder when your goal is something long term, something undefined, something theoretical, which essentially defines like career goals. And this is where I think you can really leverage the power of artificial intelligence. I recommend using AI, such as, again, you can use the free version of ChatGPT to break down those really big long-term goals into manageable chunks.
Mm,
Then the next and most important step after just breaking it down is figuring out what's actually going to motivate you to take those chunks on. So for some people, it's like seeing a timeline, seeing like, okay, I can't get to that career 2 years from now until I start moving towards it. For other people, it's a checklist. Or
mm,
maybe it's having accountability discussions with a respected peer or your partner at home. But whatever it is, make sure when you are utilizing AI to chunk up these really big, vague goals, make the first two or three of them the absolute most concrete and most actionable so that you have such a clear idea of how you're going to hit the ground running. That will let you build momentum. And then if you've heard of the snowball effect, it's like you take care of the first few little things and then the snowball starts to roll downhill. Once you start making that progress, it's so much easier to maintain it. And AI is super helpful with that.
yeah, 100%. I'd love to hear a bit about, so you talked about the methods that you use, the Berkman assessment. Are there other methods that you would suggest folks maybe check out? That's one. We had some questions about different methods in the chat, so I'm curious if there's any others that you find helpful.
Yeah, so I know in the chat I saw Myers-Briggs. I've seen folks talk about high five. Um, this is probably a sin against Berkman, which I, use and I'm like a certified facilitator, but I don't really care. I think Berkman
Mm-hmm.
is great because it uses strengths-based language and you investigate,
Right.
how you show up to others, how you have secret needs and what they are and what happens when they're not met. But I'm gonna be honest. Berkman is a tool, and so is Myers-Briggs, and so is High Five. To me, and this is probably coming across in the way I'm talking about these things, it doesn't matter as long as it's being used in good faith
Mm,
and it's being used. So at Zapier, we talk about Berkman. We talk about how, yes, it's scientifically backed. There's tons of research on it. Yes, it's strengths-based and positive. That's great. But does it resonate with you when you got your report? Like, did you read it and say, yeah, that really nails it. I can't wait to talk to my manager about this. Hopefully, yes, because that's really the only purpose is to facilitate conversations. And at Zapier, we use it in a few different ways. First, you use it to know yourself. You go to a Berkman session where you just read your own report, you analyze what it means for you and what you want to share with people about it. Then you can choose to go to a Berkman doubles, which is you and your manager or you and whoever you work with closest. And you talk through how your Berkman scores relate to each other. And then finally, we have this thing called Berkman teams, where you and your whole team can do a Berkman and talk about all of the ways that you have interplay in the way that you show up at work and what you actually need from each other. I think that the most important thing to take away when using something like Berkman is something that Berkman actually says themselves, which is that we often think about the golden rule, which is like do unto others as you would want done unto you. What we
Hmm.
actually need is do unto others as they would need done unto themselves. And Berkman allows us to have those conversations about like just because I would really like it if people incentivize me with money. Doesn't mean that everyone on my team responds to that. Like other people on my team might have a really serious need for group reward and praise related reward. And I need to internalize that instead of reacting the way I think other people would want to be treated. And so Berkman is valuable in that it allows us to have these deeper conversations. But I feel exactly the same way about Myers-Briggs, about high five, whatever you Clifton Strengths is another one. Whatever you choose to use, if you're using it to facilitate meaningful conversation, I applaud you.
Positive intelligence, that's another one. You know that one?
Yes.
Yes, the judge. We all got the judge, don't we? That imposter syndrome that we were talking about before. And they're different modalities, right? And they all draw from thousands of years of wisdom. A lot of mindfulness is in there, and like the golden rule. I like flipping that one a little bit, but it's whatever, like you said, if it's being used and being used in good faith and driving positive action, what
Yes.
works, whatever works, right? Like you said, there's earlier, everyone is different. No one size fits all for any of this type of work, whether it's modalities or AI use cases. You can adapt these to your different ones. So we only have a few minutes left. I'm curious, are there any AI driven methods you want to touch on before we wrap up to monitor career development?
Yes. I think as a parting note about AI, the last thing that I kind of want to leave you all with, let's talk for a moment about, let's examine power dynamics. We're all individuals, right? And so we're never going to be as powerful as like the larger machine of wherever we're trying to seek our career advancement, whether that's like the workforce as a whole, wherever we're employed, even like our broader team. And so something that I recommend in order to like monitor how you're doing in your career advancement, stay on top of like advocating for yourself as best you can, is set up whatever system is going to work for you. So set up a system that you'll actually use and that you understand. But then I want to encourage you to use whatever language the company or the larger power that you're working under is using for your career. So, for instance, if you are trying to advance in a company and your company uses competencies, use those competencies when you set up your system. Use those competencies in your prompt or ask ChatGPT to use those competencies and refer to them directly. Whenever you use the same language and the same standards as like the company you work for or the job you're applying to, it enables you to talk at the same level as the person who's going to be evaluating you, and it leaves fewer surprises. And then there's less room for like unspoken ideas if you're all using the same language. So I just want to encourage that no matter what you set up.
I love that. Circling back to aligning, right? That way we are aligned with the language, the modality, the jargon, whatever you want to call it, so that we're speaking the same language. Because of course, we want our AI and voice and our voice to be aligned. But at the end of the day, we're people, right? And we want to align with our coworkers, with the people around us. And that is about connecting with communication, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, is there any other, before we wrap up here, were there any things that you wanted to touch on that we didn't touch on? I always just like to ask that question.
Oh, I love that question. I think you allowed me to hammer really hard on the things that were most important to me. So I'm okay with talking a little bit about the culture at Zapier.
Yes, definitely. I would love to hear about that. So, because Zapier, well, I'm pulling up the slide too. I'm gonna start you off with a curveball here.
Oh,
Zappies, Zapparonis, Zappians.
oh, you put me on the spot. There's so much history there, but I will tell you,
I know.
say,
I'm a
I say,
little trickster, sorry.
you are. I say Zappians.
You're a
That is
Zappian, Camp
That's what I
Zappian.
heard first. I think in my first interview, I heard that and it just stuck in my brain.
Yeah, yeah. I learned the rumor of zapparonis, and
Yep.
that made my life complete.
I'm a little too food motivated to use that one because it would make me hungry. And
Exactly. You're like, oh, I don't want to eat my
yep,
logo. That's weird.
yep.
So how would you describe the culture in one word at Zapier?
I've been torturing myself about this question for like 4 weeks and I'm struggling so hard. I am going to say mm, transparent.
I think we don't need an explanation. I think that became very clear when you were saying about that open communication. That is perfect. I totally get that. What's your favorite part about working at Zapier?
Oh my gosh, the people. Once you get past that initial feeling of like everyone here is so smart and so good at their
Mm,
jobs that they're going to find out I'm not and what am I doing here? Once you get past that, it's just filled with the most incredible, motivated, knowledgeable, and
mm,
honestly like welcoming and wonderful people. To think that we spend every year we do a summit together where we all get together for a week and hang out. And every single one of those, I reflect and think like, gosh, that didn't feel like a work trip. And I hate having to connect with strangers, and that was wonderful. So
oh,
I just think the people are the best part.
I love that. And what's your top tip for someone who is interviewing, whether it be at Zapier or somewhere else?
We are, as I mentioned, transparent. The talent acquisition team, our recruiters, our sourcers, they are amazing. And they're also completely clear with the expectations. They share exactly what you need to do to apply, exactly what you should be prepared for in the interview. And I want to invite you, if you are preparing to interview at Zapier, to take it seriously, have fun with it, but follow the directions. So, like, for instance, don't skip questions in the application. A human being reads those and they're super important to assessing job fit. And if you're told like what you're going to be asked to do in an interview, it's a great idea to prepare for it. Ask your recruiter questions if you have them. They want you to succeed. But make sure that you read through and digest that information because it is laid out for you. We're not trying to trick you. And we want great people to work here. So be sure to ask any questions that you have.
Great advice. And I love highlighting what you said about the recruiters want you to succeed. That's their mission is to find you and the right fit. So I love that. And it can be easy to forget that sometimes. You're like, oh no, I'm not good enough, the imposter syndrome, right? Or it's a really tough market out there. That is very true. And they're looking for you. So, Emily, I also find it very hard to believe that you don't like connecting with strangers or new people. I'm a stranger, new person, and I had so much fun with you. So you fooled me, young lady. I don't see anything there.
Uh, I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to hang out with everybody today. Now I'm going to take a long break and pretend you all don't exist so that I can eat food. But
Bye.
after I get back to my computer, if anybody has any questions they want to follow up, feel free to look me up online. I never get tired of talking about this kind of stuff. So I am super excited to keep the conversation going.
Oh, thank you so much, Emily. This was such a power hour. Thank you for your commitment and your prep. This is one of the best chat and learns I've got to be a part of. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody who participated today. And thank you so much for coming. There will be a link with the recording. So if you didn't get to catch the beginning, fret not, friends, that link will be coming out soon. So you can rewatch it because there's a lot in there. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.